All right, so I'm going to give you 3 tips for knocking on doors as a real estate agent. If you're a realtor and you've heard about knocking on doors and you have some mixed emotions about it, maybe you've heard that it's a great source of business, or you've heard that it's something you should never do, or something that you think, hey, maybe it's got a shot. It's something that I could immediately do. I'm going to give you some advice that is going to absolutely help you if you decide to do this, and more than that, help you decide at what point in your business does it make sense to do this, where to do it strategically, where to do it effectively. And at the end, I'll even give you some scripts and some tips, some pro tips to help you do it effectively. Okay. So door knocking. Okay. This is a scary topic for a lot of people. You've already probably just gotten an adrenaline surge thinking of it, especially if you've never done it before. And this is something I have a ton of experience with because I actually got my professional start as a door knocker for a professional company, right? So my first gig, recently married, fresh out of college, I'm knocking on doors, company to company, business to business, door knocking sales for a big company called ADP. And that was my interview. My manager threw me in the car and said, hey, I need you to go into that building and I need you to come out with a stack of business cards. And on each one of these business cards, I need you to do what's called the 4 corners, and you're going to put the name of the person you talk to, the number of employees that they have, how often they run their payroll, and who's the decision maker. Go get it. And that was my interview. That wasn't even day 1. That was day before 1, right? So, and then I spent the next 5 to 10 years doing versions of that before I got into real estate. And let me tell you, it is a whole lot easier to do door knocking in real estate than it is to do B2B, because in the business world, you got gatekeepers and they have a process. And guess what? It still works. Now, when should you do it? Now, this is something that I've used occasionally and had pretty good results doing it. And there's many times I'm like, I should go door knocking today because it always works better than I think it's going to. And I've used this to close clients. And, I remember my very first year in real estate, I just showed up early to a listing appointment and I did what I was trained to do. I did the 4 corners. I went to the house in front, the house behind, the house next to, and the house on the other side, just like I used to do in B2B sales. And I just ran into a guy taking out his trash, and that guy turned into 4 transactions from a nice casual conversation with a dude taking out his trash can. So you want to understand when, where, why, how, all the above. The first thing that you want to do is you want to go in with a specific strategy and stay organized, okay? The key to door knocking is that people are going to be at different stages in their buying journey, right? So there's very few things that you're going to be able to say that's going to cause somebody to buy or sell a home. They already have their wants, needs, and desires. They already have real estate needs. You're just using this as an opportunity to engage with them, to get into those wants, desires, needs, hesitations, concerns, constraints, all of those things, right? Now, that whole framework for how to have that conversation, I've outlined in what I call the magic script or the universal real estate conversation. And it's just a framework, a series of questions that are designed to help you talk through everything with a client and turn a conversation with absolutely anyone in any context to turn them into a real estate client of yours, right? But there's nothing that's going to cause that. It's just uncovering it. So when you knock on their door, you're just uncovering where they're at and what potential needs they might have. Of course, there's some ways to get into it. However, it does help to know that somewhere between 5 and 15% of people are going to move every single year. So if you knock on 10 doors, it's quite likely that one of those people is going to move, right? And so if they move and they own that house, then quite likely you'll get the sale and the purchase. So knock on 10 doors, get 2 transactions, not a bad time, right? Of course, that's not saying that all 10 of them are going to answer and talk to you and be nice and all the above, but it helps you in that process to know the stats. And especially if you're in what I call a move-up neighborhood, right? Like I love doing this in townhouse communities because townhouses are where a lot of people start with their home buying journey and they own their townhouse. Let's say it's a 3-2, they own it. And then they have a couple of kids and now it's tiny to them. They got promoted, they have extra money. They're going to sell the townhouse and buy another house. And that's a twofer, right? And people rarely live in townhouses for longer than 5 years. I'm just making that number up, but I've noticed it's a much shorter time period than they do for a detached property. But I always go in with a specific story, right? And I like to do this. I don't like to make it up. I like to especially use it if I have some sort of client in the neighborhood or somebody that's looking to move in. And I say, hey, just as an example off the cuff here, I'll say like, hey, I have some clients that are really interested in this neighborhood. They're probably looking towards the end of the summer. So it's not quite right now, but would you ever consider selling your home? And I just leave it hanging like that. And their reaction to that question is going to tell you almost everything that you need to know, right? If they hesitate and they're like, well, that means they've thought about it. And it means that they quite likely would, but they have a bunch of buts, right? And then that's the question is, what are the buts and what's keeping them from moving on, right? Because certainly everyone would love to live in a better home than they live in now, but there's constraints and reasons why they don't. Get into that universal conversation and it will walk you through how to uncover all of that. So that simple opener of just, have you guys ever thought about moving? Wait for hesitation and that'll tell you everything. That'll tell you a lot. And that conversation also, that universal conversation will tell you what to do if they don't hesitate, right? Because if they don't hesitate, it means they either love it or they know that they can't move, right? And the decision isn't really theirs to make. It's just done, right? So come in with a story, especially if you have a specific buyer that you can connect that storyline to and just say, hey, I'm sorry to knock on the door. I promised my client that I would do everything that I could do to help them find a home. They're thinking August, September, somewhere in that neighborhood. Have you guys ever thought about selling? Yes, no, whatever. I totally understand. Do you know anyone in the neighborhood that's thought about selling? Right? And then yes, no, whatever. Get into that conversation. And then if they've thought about selling, you start to dig into that, get some of the details. And if they know anyone, then you go talk to that person. You say, hey, I know this is kind of a wild thought, but I was talking to, your neighbor Joey, and he thought maybe you guys have talked about moving some point. I've got a client that's moving into the neighborhood. Tell me what you have in mind. Where would you go? What would you want to do? What's holding you back from selling this place? How are you guys doing, with the finances? Do you know the numbers? Would you like me to run some numbers for you so you would know what you would net if you sold this place? Why don't I come back next week and we'll run through the numbers together, right? You're just looking for something you can do for them. As soon as you start doing real estate stuff for them, they've become a real estate client, right? That's really the moment that it happens. And then you just continue the process until they get the result that they're looking for. But that is a good tip, to go in with a context of a specific person. Now, that's if you're hitting it. The other tip is to do it when you are already going to be in a neighborhood, right? Anytime you've got a showing or a listing or something like that, some people call it a circle, some people call it a clover leaf, but go talk to all of the neighbors and tell them the story of why you're in that house and figure out what's the story of why they're in their house, right? So you can just knock on the door right next to the house that you're there to show and say, hey, just wanted to check in with you. I hope you don't mind. Is it okay time to ask you a question or two about the neighborhood? How long have you guys lived here? How do you like the neighborhood? What don't you like about it? And you're doing it. The official story is that you're there to serve the client that you're showing the house to, right? But you're also having a real estate conversation, a magic universal real estate conversation with that neighbor, and you're uncovering all of their wants and needs. And this goes into the third and final tip to pull it all together and make this work. And that is, you've got to stay organized, right? You're uncovering data. 10% might move this year. So don't get rid of the other 90%, right? Because another 10% are going to move next year, and another 10% are going to move the year after that, and another 10% are going to move the year after that. And so you want to get in touch with these people, gather their contact information, take detailed notes, get permission to stay in touch with them, set them up on an automation, set them up in your CRM, get some sort of permission to add value to their life in some way. And then you want to be checking back in with them. And you say, okay, this person said they're not moving for 3 years because their kid graduates in 3 years. By the way, that was the story of the trash can story. He said, I'd love to move, but I can't move until my daughter graduates. And I said, well, when does she graduate? And he said, 4 years from now. I said, great, I'll call you in 3. And I did, and he did, and we made a bunch of money together. It was great. So whatever the story is, make a note of it. Why would they move? Why wouldn't they move? Get yourself organized, leave yourself follow-up items on the calendar in your CRM, set them up on a property search for the things that they want to see, do an automated home valuation, and then just check in with them and say, hey, you know, I really enjoyed talking with you. You guys seem like great people. Always want to keep, you know, my finger on the pulse of the neighborhood. How are things going in the neighborhood? Is that HOA still a pain in the neck? How's the parking? What else is going on? And they become your insider, but every time you talk to them, you're also figuring out if they would move, what they'd be looking for. And so you're just one step ahead of them every step of the way. So those are 3 tips to help you with door knocking. Now, when would you not do this? When you're too busy, right? If you are just too busy to do more prospecting, that's a good problem to have. If the whole thought of this scares you, it might be worth doing just to stretch yourself and grow. However, there's other great ways of creating leads. It's not your only option. I'm not telling you that you have to do this. It's a great skill set to have. And so it's a great one to build, even if you're scared to do it. And you just want to be careful. Remember, always prioritize the relationship over the profit. Come in with a good reason, tell the truth, be organized, and you're going to do awesome. And let me know how it goes. If you've had a success story door knocking, I want to hear it. Just keep the comments positive if you could. And let me know if is there a specific question that you have about door knocking, or an alternative, or anything that you've learned, a tip that you could share. Leave it below in the comments and let me know what you would like to hear about next.